All right, the Green Legion Brigade is a movement dedicated to helping shape young lives by recognizing and responding to unmet, unheard, and unexpressed emotional needs. We want to equip youth-serving organizations to build socio-emotional ecosystems that create environments where every young person feels connected, seen, and supported. Each episode shares stories, insights, and strategies that empower adults to give young people within their circles of influence the green light to be great. I'm Raymond Omar Long, managing partner and principal consultant of Long Impact Group. I equip mission organizations with strategic guidance, capacity building tools, and operational solutions to drive impact. My work transforms complex ideas, enabling organizations to scale their missions and deepen community impact. For the past decade, I've helped civic and nonprofit boards secure major funding, expand services, and build lasting partnerships. I have a reputation for aligning vision with execution, creating systems that optimize performance, enhance collaboration, and produce long-term results. Today, we're exploring something that every young person deserves, and that's spaces that heal. Spaces where grief is acknowledged, not avoided. Spaces where emotional pain isn't dismissed, but gently held, understood, and guided. And our special guest today knows these spaces deeply. Brianna Dodds, she understands the crossroads so many young people face, trying to recover from pain while building walls to avoid being hurt again. She reminds us that grief isn't a disruption to life, it's a part of life. And with the right environment, young people can learn not just to survive grief, but grow through it. Brianna has spent years serving individuals and families as a certified trauma therapist at a trauma-focused treatment center. She specializes in helping people rediscover hope in the struggle and after the struggle. She holds a Master of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy and is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, she's helping us understand how to create spaces where young people feel safe to grieve, safe to feel, safe to heal. Please help me welcome Brianna Dodds.
Wow. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. This episode, it's the first two was a lot about personal healing and community-minded healing. And I'm shifting from that to talk about the environments that make healing possible. We'll talk about how adults, families, and communities can create emotional support spaces that promote resilience and growth in young people. And you're going to really help us unpack how grief shows up in young people, how loss really impacts them, and what helps them adapt and recover. Together, we'll explore relational safety, how being emotionally safe helps kids reconnect and open up, why routine, reliability, and presence help the brain heal. We'll talk about open communication, how honest conversations create room for grief and growth. Together, we'll explore how grief can actually become a pathway to growth. It's going to be a good conversation. And so let's dive right in, shall we? Let's talk about understanding grief and growth in young people. Let's start by having a conversation. What is grief? How would you define grief personally and clinically?
Yeah. In layman's terms, I think navigating the process of loss, obviously it has this stigma, right, associated with death, but loss is so much more than that. It's just the process of adjusting to life after something, right? Whether that be job loss, moving a school, parents divorcing, right? Losing a broken friendship, right? But in the simplest terms, navigating loss.
Yeah, navigating loss. And you know, young people, typically they sometimes experience grief from my experience, right? Working with young people in youth development, right? The past decade. It's young people, they experience grief over things that don't always look like loss to adults.
Yes.
Right. But to them, it feels like the world has shifted. And so it's how can it manifest differently in children and adolescents?
I think that's such a good point about children experiencing it differently. I tend to be a storyteller. And in thinking about watching my nephew, right, and him making the transition from staying with a family friend to going to school or losing a toy or something that he really loves. When he throws a tantrum, we as adults are like, okay, seriously, But in helping to empathize of thinking about, okay, in that place, right, with his mental, the state that he's in now, with his maturity level, he's not being dramatic. That's a real loss to him. It really is a big deal to him. And so in thinking about how it manifests in children, while they may not have the words to say, I'm hurting because this is gone, we've got to look at their behaviors, the way their conversation changes, and the things that they complain about or are offended by can often highlight what it is that they're missing. And so it may not have the same language of adults, but the hurt feels the same.
That's good. Let's make that practical for our audience. What should, I love you said behavioral change, right? And changes in their tones, in their grades. So if you're in a school setting, right? Like, what are some of the signs you should look for that may not be obvious that a child is experiencing grief?
Yeah. In thinking about, because obviously it's not one size fits all, but if we are seeing drastic personality changes, right? So if a child is generally joyful, outgoing, extroverted, if they become more isolated or more combative, more defiant. Also looking in when I used to do work with small children and looking in if they are to write a story or to draw a picture, they communicate through that. And so even in their playtime, listening to their conversations, the stories they make up, what are they talking about? What is different? What stands out to you? We cannot not communicate. So even if they're not verbally saying things, they're communicating in every other way that they can.
Dream with me here. Well, if we could, because a part of the Green Light to Be Great framework is I really want to assist youth serving organizations develop systems to identify when a child may be experiencing some type of grief. Dream with us here. What does it look like to have some sort of system or check-in where there can kind of be like this systematic approach to really getting the pulse of every young person you're seeing every day in your classrooms or in your school buildings?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is to make ourselves available. Oftentimes we will ask, well, if we learn later that someone is grieving or has lost someone, we'd be like, well, I never knew. Well, why didn't you say anything? And most often, youth and adolescents are not going to say, hey, come sit down. I want to talk about my feelings.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things is relationship and that rapport and how we build it. And not just asking, how are you? But you present and you feel more safe to them if they know Raymond's always going to show up. He's always going to listen to me. He's always going to ask how I'm feeling. Even if he has to challenge or correct me, he is a constant presence in my life. And so relationship and consistency is one of the biggest emotional supports that we can be to youth.
Yeah. Relationships and consistency. I like that. That's one of the key pillars in the framework. So now let's shift and let's talk about what young people grieve over. It's I always tell this story of, growing up, before the age of 16, I had experienced 2 divorces, a dad with, substance abuse. I had experienced parental incarceration, right? I had a mother that was disabled. I had an older brother who decided adopted brother who decided to leave our home. And I didn't really understand what grief was until I went on my own journey of personal healing as an adult. I'm talking like in the past 2 years, and my therapist, when she heard my story, she asked me, "How did you deal with that as a child? Like how did you grieve?" And I told her, I said, I don't remember grieving. I remember very intense moments, right? Like like when I saw my father like in cuffs for the first time, right? When we went to visit him at a detention facility, and that image is still in my head. I can actually feel those emotions whenever I even think about that time. But other than that, I didn't know that I was grieving, right? I never had mental health counseling, right, or support. The only outlet I had was most likely probably the church, and that was like through my mom saying, pray for my son. He's going through some things. But there was nothing like practical, right? There's been a price to pay as an adult, right, for like not dealing with all of that grief. So, and now that I think about it, it's all the things that young people can grieve over, right? It's the things that you've heard about, right? It's the drug addiction, right? It's the imprisonment. But I also attended 7 different schools. It's friends and environments, right? I moved a lot from house to house, right? And so there was never really a stable environment. The longest place I've ever lived is like with the house that me and my wife live in now, right?
Mhm.
Which is we've been there together 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, what have you seen young people grieve over? I know I've noticed some of those obvious things, but what are young people grieving over like these days?
Yeah, I think it can oftentimes be some of the things that adults should grieve over or do and just don't talk about it. But things that I see and hear youth grieve over quite a bit. A big one, obviously, is breakups.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And I think for us as adults or parents, it can be like, were you young, or that's child, or that's high school love, you don't understand, but they are processing that much bigger, right, than we are. But something that I don't think is talked about as much is seeing youth grieve the life that they thought they would have. And so what you mentioned as far as a mother with disability or a father in prison, if they have this dream in their mind of just a stable two-parent home and I don't have it, we can grieve even things that we never had.
Wow.
Right. Or that we had very briefly. And we don't always put words to that. Or it's something that, in working with children of like military families, if it's understood we have to do this for work, parents say, okay, we just got to do this. But for their child, it has a bigger impact, and it's not a right or wrong, but it impacts them no less. Yeah, something like breakups, the life that they don't have or didn't have or desire, moving, environmental changes, people, extended family. I think that my obvious answer, the bigger answer is, I think they grieve many of the things that we as adults press down or suppress or minimize.
Yeah. It's a learned behavior,
Yes.
right, with adults, right?
Yes.
But as children, it's behavior that we opt into, right?
Yes.
We probably learned that, right, growing up as well.
Mhm.
But at least we're aware of it, right?
Yeah. Think about what we hear.
They don't know until
Don't
later.
cry. Yeah. Don't cry. It's not a big deal. Let it go. Be strong.
Right.
That's how we're teaching them.
Right. That's good. That's good. So I had this thought, and it's some research that I would love to get into as my career progresses. But we know child abandonment as, the things you hear about in the media.
Mhm.
It's the cigarette burns, not having food. But I think that not giving a young person the social, emotional support they need is kind of a form of like subtle child abandonment.
Yes. Neglect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and how do you see, because you've had the unique opportunity of counseling like young people and
Mhm.
adults. How do you see adults who children, right, who were ignored, right, who kind of were neglected emotionally? How does it play out in their adult life?
Yeah. They're going to get your attention one way or another. Right.
Yeah.
And hearing all attention is good attention. And so if me asking you for it or saying I need this is not getting your attention, okay, if the school starts calling you because I'm misbehaving, I got your attention. It's not the attention that you wanted,
Yeah.
right? And to your point of how does that play out as adults? We have those experiences as adults. If I never learned how to emotionally attached or to be vulnerable or to communicate, that shows up in my adult relationships, in my friendships, in my romantic relationships. And when people as adults are requiring more of me, I feel incapable. And so I hear things like, "Oh, that's why I don't do friendships," or "No, this is just how I am." And in reality, there's a deficit there. I don't have it, and we're not going to access it unless we start to do that work as adults, which can feel harder because it's like, if I've been this way for 30 years,
Right.
why change now? Or
Yeah.
even a
Yeah.
disbelief that we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge uphill battle.
Yes.
We spend so much time preparing young people to do so many things in adulthood, right? We want them to have jobs, and we want them to have families and to get married and to be productive citizens of society, right? And there's been this movement on financial literacy and No Child Left Behind from a grade standpoint. But I think we have a pandemic in a sense of young people being emotionally stunted as they
Yeah.
enter into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a price to pay for their lives, and there's a price to pay a society as a whole, right? When we have so many young people who are not getting the support that they deserve.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research on social emotional learning. But we understand, like in education overall, that it's important that you have support support, right? Environments to learn
Yeah.
how to write, how to read, how to do math. But when it comes to like emotional learning, right? It's like, oh no, like this is, if we develop a curriculum, right? If we put you through some workshops, right? You can learn, but it's like you have to provide support for them to learn emotions as well.
But they do.
Yeah.
And they
Tell me more.
they
Yeah.
learn it by watching us. They learn by demonstration. Do as I say and not as I do does not work. It does not work. And I know we heard it growing up, but it doesn't work. They are watching, and that is how they learn what emotions are appropriate, what's okay to let out. Obviously, we know it's socially acceptable for men to be angry, but not for women, or it's socially acceptable for women to cry, but not for men. That's a learned behavior, and it's not that it was always verbally said, but it was demonstrated for our youth. And so they are learning emotionally, but it's not always the healthiest thing. And parents, I get pushback on this when I share this, but oftentimes they'll bring their child to the office and say, okay, I'm seeing these things and I want them to open up and I want them to know it's okay. And I'm like, okay, when's the last time you did it? When have they seen you do it? And the reality is they're always learning, but whether it's healthy or not, that's on what we're showing them.
Yeah. So I'm hearing the first thing is to practice what you preach, right? Lead by example.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect, segue to what we're discussing next. So let's how can we help adults create environments that promote healing?
Yeah.
What would you say to a group of teachers or administrators who are looking at this show and they're saying, yes, I understand that they need support, but we weren't trained on how to do that.
Right.
How can I create that environment?
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to say I have so much compassion and empathy for teachers because I work with my people in a one-on-one setting, but to have a classroom of 20, 25, 30, and being able to manage that, kudos to teachers. And obviously there is no expectation for them to have all the answers. I think one of the greatest sources of support for teachers as far as building this type of environment is to know their own resources. And so in building relationships with parents, community support, local therapists, right? Let me get you plugged in. Even if I can't give you one-on-one all day, let me get in relationship with those who are, right? If I see a child, in a classroom is behaving differently or I'm seeing some changes, if I have developed a relationship, right, or some form of communication with the parent, I can let them know, right? And so it's not that's one part of it. And the other part is and I think it goes back to what we said earlier, the relationship and the rapport, right? Something as small as saying good morning every morning and asking how are you, or a small compliment on appearance or effort or grades. They always hear from us when they're messing up. They always hear from us when they're not doing well. If we can be as consistent and make it a big deal when they have done something well or they're showing up well, children remember that. They remember that, and it can shift to, oh my gosh, that felt so good to get that positive praise. Let me continue to engage in this way. Or when they have a problem, when they have a question, I'm more likely to come to the person that always pays attention to me or that acknowledges my presence than someone that I feel ignored by.
Yeah. So I think that this social emotional support at times can be overcomplicated.
Sure.
Right. And everything you've given us today, it's profound, but it's simple, right? And the foundation of that is showing up. And so and that's what this framework is all about. It's giving that constant green light to say, hey, show up, like you're wanted, and we see you and we understand you, and we can empathize with your life. And then that will allow young people to really thrive. And we need more of that in the world. I'm going to ask our audience just to reflect right on a time, and I want us to participate in this as well.
Sure.
Reflect upon a time where, think about a time you experienced loss as a young person. What would it have meant if an adult had said it's okay to feel this way? Like I'm here with you. Is there anything that just jumps out at you?
Yeah. My biggest instance of grief wasn't until I was an adult. But when I think back to smaller losses, as I was growing up, I think it would have been nice to hear an adult's experience of it. Like, tell me that
Hmm.
I'm not the only person feeling this way. Tell me that this is not new. Tell me I'm not crazy for feeling this way.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes children or youth don't always feel safe to open up to. And I don't mean like tell all your business, but
Right.
if you can just meet them on their level, only if it's true, right? And say, hey, I've been there,
Right.
right? Like, oh, I remember what that felt like.
Yeah.
And if you remember what it felt like, have grace for that. Have grace for that moment. And so I think that would have been really helpful for me for an adult to open up and say, hey, I've been there. Like, I know what that's like.
Yeah. That's good. I think in society we are more emotionally aware than ever, right? I don't think that always equates to, emotional intelligence, right? But we're aware of how we're feeling. And so I just, it's with everything that I had to face, right? All the adversity that I went through, the way now that I look back, the way people responded to me was I became a charity case,
Mm,
right? Everything was about let's help him avoid prison. Let's help him avoid drugs. When the lifestyle that accompanies like that type of result, it never interested me,
yeah.
right? And I wonder if somebody would have just asked, like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel when that happened to your dad? How do you feel about what happened to your mom? How did you process that?
Hmm.
I don't think I would have struggled with like the anger and
Yeah.
like the resentment that I've had to really fight off
Hmm.
in adult.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you think you would have had the language to answer that question as a youth, teenager?
I think it would have been very vague,
Okay.
right? I think words like embarrassing, like
Okay.
it's embarrassing, like,
Hmm.
it's, why my father? Maybe more questions,
Hmm.
but you bring up a great point because if I didn't have the language, the reality is I felt something somewhere,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so I think that's when we'll go ahead, right, and really advocate for, mental health therapy, right, in the lives of young people.
Hmm.
Because when you have someone trained, they can, in a sense, pull that out of you. What do you think about that?
I think that I don't want to diminish the impact of something like mentorship.
Yeah.
So no, they may not have the exact language when we say, "How do you feel about this?"
Yeah.
But it's more likely to come out over time, right? And so if somebody is, picking me up every other Saturday or just spending time with me when I'm ready to talk, that's who I'm talking to because they're there. I
Yeah.
cannot say enough just the difference that presence and relationship makes. In my own experience of grief, it's like, I may not remember everything that was said, but I remember who was there and I'll never forget it. And
Yeah.
children are no exception to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought up mentorship, right? That's one thing I'm truly passionate about. And I think how mentorship works has changed over time, right?
Sure.
It was very like volunteer driven, and there's a challenge with getting volunteers in schools now. There's after the pandemic, right? People still aren't coming out. They've adjusted to this virtual life,
Yeah.
and so, but there's ways that you can provide mentorship in your building, in your space, without having extra volunteers, right?
Yeah.
There's peer-to-peer mentorship
Mm.
opportunities that's older students showing support to younger students. There's opportunities for teachers to build different relationships right outside of their immediate classroom, right? It's just organizing things in a way where there's somebody showing up for every young person for something outside of the outcomes we want inside of school buildings and after school programs. Been a part of or seen anything like that from a mentorship standpoint that wasn't like your standard big brothers, big sisters recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When what year was this? 2014. My friend and I started something like that. It was on the campus of Arkansas State, and then we were allowed the opportunity to go into a middle school as well, just to sit with them and talk. Not always coming in, okay, we're going to share this lesson. This is the curriculum, but like, what do y'all want to talk about today? Like, what questions are on your mind? That was our intent starting out, was just because at that time we weren't seeing anything like that. And so we weren't trying to be, make a big deal of anything, but the doors just kept opening. And that's where I saw how great the need was. And so that's the first instance that comes to mind when I think about my experience of mentorship.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. So now let's talk about grief from a different angle. When I say turning grief into growth, what comes into your mind?
Yeah. I think it sounds beautiful. I think that process is actually terrifying and can be very ugly. Productive, right? Nonetheless, and really meaning growth, but to really be open to the opportunity of growth from grief, that requires an incredible level of vulnerability and some level of comfort with emotions, right? And thinking about, and I'm going to reference my own experience of grief and then just clinically the things that I see when we think about, there are 5 main stages of grief. Many over the years have been added on, but when the concept was first defined, we've got denial, anger, sadness, bargaining, acceptance. I think I said that out of order. But those are the main 5. And so many times we want to rush to acceptance, meaning, okay, I've accepted it. I'm still sad, but I'm at a better place. And that's great. But every emotion before that is so necessary before we get to acceptance or growth. For my people that rush to that, I'm concerned because you're going to feel those other emotions. And thinking about, we don't experience them necessarily chronologically, but I think if we're going to get to a level of growth through grief, we've got to be open to the ugly. Are you okay saying you're angry? Are you okay expressing and showing that you're sad? Do you feel guilty for having the questions of why and thinking about what you should have done differently or how your life would have been? All of that is necessary.
Yeah.
And those are things that sometimes are not socially acceptable, or we get negative feedback when we express those types of things. I have to bring up, sometimes there's a pushback on that in the religious community, right? To pray it away and you'll be okay. And so really being comfortable experiencing the emotions that feel a little bit scary before we ever reach that level of growth. It's absolutely attainable through grief, though.
Yeah, for sure. I really wonder the stages of grief you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like how, to your point about it being shut down, I wonder how natural is it without it being shut down? Is it for a young person to kind of go through that process?
Yeah.
Is it something we have to intentionally teach? Is it something that if there are adults around who are healthy from an emotional standpoint, that they'll learn how to deal with it? A story comes to mind that kind of illustrates this. Brene Brown told it in one of her books. Talked about how, if her daughter was like afraid of something, that, if she, instead of being able to run to her room, she was okay, I acknowledge that you're scared, right, of this potential threat, but I'm going to like sit in it with you, right? Like not neglecting you, acknowledging that you're scared, right? But then also teaching that you can't just run from it. And so like that example, it sticks with me as one that I think we can use to translate to how can we like sit with a young person through grief, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like reinforcing bad behaviors, right? Or demonstrating, right, unhealthy ways of dealing with their grief.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm gonna say it again. We do it by demonstration.
No, please say it again. We need it. Yeah.
But I think an excellent way to sit with a person, specifically a young person through grief. Your initial question was, is it natural for them to feel those emotions? Yeah, they're going to feel it whether they're aware of what they're feeling or not, right? There's going to be sadness. There will more than likely be anger. And sometimes I get pushback on the anger because it's like, well, no, I never like yelled or exploded, but we can implode too. I may never yell, but I'm holding on to some anger that this ever happened, or maybe at people, right, that I feel like weren't there for me or that could have made the process different, right? I think all of those things will come naturally. I think an excellent way for an adult to support a youth through that is in a way similar to I mentioned earlier of letting them, let them feel it. If we're not afraid of emotions, they won't be. But we can get somebody else's anger can make us uncomfortable. And so we shut it down in them. Someone else's sadness, I see this all the time. When people are not comfortable with tears, they'll rush to make you stop crying. That's because you're uncomfortable. Not because the person wants to stop crying, right? So we throw tissue or try to hug. But I think an incredible way is to let them feel what they're feeling. And we don't have to provide an explanation. It's okay to not have an answer. I'm going to go back to the difference that just presence make.
Yeah.
Even if it's literally physically sitting there with them.
Not trying to fix it.
You can't.
Wow. Yeah. Because everyone has to go through their own process. We can't be the emotional savior, right?
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's have a conversation about the next generation of therapists, right? Who are motivated by your story and what you've done. And they want to solve problems. They want to be a part of helping young people with emotional support, being healthy. What would you say to them? What advice would you give to them if they were looking at you today?
Yeah, I think the best therapists do and have done their own work. When thinking about, and I'm totally okay sharing my experience of grief, but losing my mom in 2018, it changed the game for me as it related to how I showed up for other people in hard things, right? If you go into this level of work, if you go into this industry with the mindset of I'm going to fix things, you're already off, right?
Yeah.
And it helping people is an excellent mindset, but we're not fixing people, right?
It's being present. Yeah.
Yes, it's being present. And obviously, yes, bringing interventions, right? Solution, help, assistance, resources to the table, but allowing the other person to do their work. Game changer. But you're not open to that and you're not familiar with that and you don't know what it feels like if you have not done your own and are not open to doing your own work.
That's good. That's good. Tell us about some of, you've helped adults, you've helped children. Tell us about your clinical background. Like walk us through your time from, getting your master's degree, passing the boards,
Okay.
your
That
first
feels like
assignment.
forever ago. Okay.
Tell us about that.
So graduated with my master's and my first job was working in residential therapy. So meaning residential treatment center. So the client lives there at the treatment center for typically it's like a minimum of 3 months. And that was in Little Rock and that was with adolescents. And man, that was a game changer. And more adults in therapy will work to spare your feelings or present well. Children don't care. So it made me really experienced in working with children. But it really opened my eyes to, I think it's so easy on the outside looking in to say, oh my goodness, they're bad or they're misbehaved. But when you sit with them and you hear their stories or you see that their parents or they don't have much family coming to visit or they start talking about things that happened to them and that they have seen that's really not appropriate for children to see, it makes more sense of the behaviors.
Right.
That's first job. And then I went to another residential treatment center in Searcy, and I was there for 4 years. I really would say that made me the therapist that I am in working with families. And so if a child was there, family therapy was mandatory. They can't even admit if the family is not committed to coming. That's my favorite thing is working with systems. We can talk to children all day. I want to talk to who they're going home to. That's where it's going to make the difference. And then now being in private practice, working more one-on-one.
So what do you say to a therapist who's like, I want to help with the trauma? Like what are the certifications I go after, right? You learn about a lot of theories, right, in school. But let us in on the practical side of that. What has been your approach and what advice would you give to someone who's interested in becoming a therapist, who's specifically interested in trauma and helping young people and being a part of a movement like the Green Light to be great?
As it relates to working with trauma, I think there are so many avenues. There is no one way type thing. And so I think in any area that you're in, whether it's social work, one-on-one, group therapy, even mentorship, I think the greatest thing is to be trauma informed and know what trauma is. If your goal is to work with trauma, know what it is, be familiar, and explore your own.
Okay, that's good. Well, listen, this has been a fabulous conversation. I'm sure our listeners have really picked up some tips on how they can be better at supporting young people. So really want to thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insight. I've definitely enjoyed our conversation. So tell us, like, how can the audience get in contact with you if it's for, therapy, if it's, if it's, a book or devotion that you wrote? Go ahead and do a shameless plug and tell everybody how they can get in contact with you.
Everything on briannaDodds.com, BriannaDodds.com.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much. And until next time, I'm Raymond Omar Long, the host of the Green Light to Be Great podcast. See you then.